In our top story this hour, President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on all South Africans to end the culture of silence around gender-based violence and to report perpetrators to the police. In a statement, the president says he is disgusted that at the time when the country is battling the COVID-19 pandemic, violent men are taking advantage of the eased restrictions of movement to attack women and children. His comments come in the wake of the killings of Tsegofatso Pule and Naledi Pangindao, Nompumelelo Chaka and other women in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. In the latest incident, the body of a young woman was found dumped in Soweto in Gauteng. International Albinism Awareness Day is observed every year on June the 13th, which is today, to highlight the rights of those born with albinism and increase awareness of the condition. The theme gains significance this year since the novel coronavirus disease. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in the spread of misinformation against those who have or are living with albinism. We earlier spoke to Dr. Maxwell Thabethe, who is the chairperson of the National Albinism Task Force.
It's a very important day to us as people with albinism. This is an achievement that has been born after the adoption of democracy in 1994. So the adoption of democracy introduced us to all structures of the world and allowed us to benefit from every policy that is governing the world. Like the adoption of June 13 as an International Albinism Awareness Day. It is where we were declared as having a disability, because before that, we were not identified whether disabled or not disabled. But getting identified and qualified as disabled persons, it gave us benefits of reasonable accommodation, and it gave us as a platform for support which we needed so that we can shine as we were born to shine.
Of course, we are talking about recognition, but there are other issues, horrendous societal issues, where people with albinism are targeted for sinister reasons in societies. Just take us through these and why there's a need for people to change the way they look at people who have albinism.
I think everything emanated from colorism. That we've got a different pigmentation is exposing us to dangers and unhealthy beliefs, myths, and harmful practices. African people have a tendency of saying if something is unique, it means it can be used to strengthen some of traditional healings. They associate almost all the times any difference to spiritual practices and spiritual beliefs. So those beliefs based on our different color has exposed us to dangers. But one thing I want to emphasize is that we don't have to confine albinism into harmful attacks and forget about the emotional impact that underpins the existence of a person with albinism. If the psychosocial part of a person is not balanced, that person is unable to perform in everything that is societal based.
So based on what you are saying, how are people living with albinism engaging with the conversation of Black Lives Matter? Because this is one of those issues that cuts across color lines. You have white people with albinism and black people with albinism.
People with albinism on African racial groups are evident and they are visible. One thing that we are engaging in as organizations is to teach communities. Make a number of awarenesses, engage in different trainings in different parts of societies, engaging government and teaching government on how a person with albinism should live, and teaching people with albinism how they should behave and how they should teach.
All right, so let's continue with the discussion. Each year, events are held to educate people and celebrate people with albinism who continue to suffer all types of human rights violations. The theme for this year, as you may have heard, is Made to Shine. And the reason for it is to celebrate the achievements and the successes of people living with albinism worldwide. It is also a call to stand in solidarity with people living with albinism through their challenges. Someone who's made it against all odds is Simba Gozo, an entrepreneur, motivational speaker and well-known model who now joins me now live via Skype. Good afternoon to you, Simba. Thank you so much for joining us here on the SABC News channel.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all the viewers.
Thank you so much for coming through. So let's just start by reflecting on the significance of today being the International Albinism Awareness Day.
All right. Sorry, can you come again?
No, I was just saying, let's just reflect on how important is it to have a day such as today set aside to celebrate and recognize people living with albinism.
So the importance of today is, the way I look at it is, I believe it's good to have a day when we solely focus on albinism, but I believe that it's a daily thing that we need to focus on to understand what we can do and what we can't do in terms of the myths that go around in terms of body parts being used for muti, to make potions, to make people rich, discrimination, misunderstanding of what albinism is within black communities and within white communities, and just as overall. I think the importance of today is just to understand that we are all one. We all just come in different shapes and sizes and colors. And yes, we all have different challenges. And at the end of the day, we're all human.
So the theme for this year, as I said on my introduction, that is Made to Shine. And the reality, Simba, is it's not necessarily very easy for the albinism community to shine and strive in the different countries. How has it been for you personally, from when you were growing up to where you are now as an entrepreneur, as a motivational speaker, as a model?
I would say, there's been progress, amongst people accepting and understanding what, albinism is. So when it comes to the ability to be able to shine and grow within our skin as black Africans that have white skin, as crazy that might sound, we've been, I would say, the path is a little bit easier. Yes, it has its challenges, but for myself, it's been a very long and hard road. I'm still on that long and hard road every day. I won't say that it's easy in any way, but I would say I've become stronger, but I've also been able to open doors for others to come, behind me, have it a little bit easier as the elders have done for myself.
But why is it, as you say, it's still a long and hard journey for you? What's making it very difficult for you? What are the challenges? Share with us those obstacles.
Well, the biggest challenge, I think, for myself, what it has been, when I worked in corporate South Africa, was proving that I was human before I could actually do the job. So in the sense of people looking past my albinism and just seeing me for Simba and being able to project manage the project and just deliver. I think that's been the most difficult thing. I mean, I would say the longest challenge I've had is actually being seen for Simba. Yes, my skin is white. Yes, it stands out. But I'm not just this. I'm so much more. I have so much to offer. I can do so much more. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is just being seen for who I am and what I can do.
So you've been very vocal on how we should address people living with albinism, to say that you're not albinos, as some people refer to yourself and others, but rather people living with albinism. School us a bit on this concept.
Well, it's in the short version of it is that anything can be an albino. So now when you call me an albino, you're dehumanizing me. You're removing the human element from me. So you get, tigers that have albinism, plants that have albinism, So now when you say I'm albino, you're removing that. I'm not the condition. I cannot be a condition. I'm a human being living with albinism.
So you are also a father, and in one of the videos that you have posted on social media, you talked to us about what your daughter may have overheard at school, some kids calling you, or rather saying to her that she's got a white father. And you really had to sit your daughter down to have that discussion with her. Talk to us about that experience and perhaps the understanding of your daughter, or rather your children, with you being a father living with albinism.
Well, you know what? My daughter grew up not realizing that, her father has albinism. She just thought I'm white because my older sister is married to a Swedish man. So I think she just thought the fathers are white and the mothers are brown. Until she went to school and, one of the children started teasing her and she didn't like it, and she told me about it when I picked her up. And obviously I had the discussion and tell her that, look, daddy is different. Daddy's got albinism. My body just doesn't create melanin like hers does. So I'm not brown like her. I'm white, but I'm still a father. I'm still a black man. And that conversation, obviously having that conversation with a six-year-old, that time she was 7, is a bit challenging, trying to make her understand what it actually is. Because to her, it's like that child is being rude to my dad. And because she thought I'm white.
It must have been a very quite difficult conversation, and I suppose that the same goes. Even if you were to have the same conversation with people my age or older, it would still be difficult, because you still get people, when they look at people living with albinism, they still look at them as if they're different from the rest of us.
Yeah, so in my experience, you get two versions, if I'm going to shorten it down. You get the one that's really shocked and doesn't understand what albinism is and is literally freaked out by it. And then you get the one that's really intrigued by it and has multiple questions about it. How do you do this? Can you do this? Can you do that? And then, in short, I'll just put it in two different people. Or there's a third one in the middle that just looks from the side, but I won't count them. But with adults, you get strange questions that you'd also get from a child, but it goes back to understanding, So it's not knowing, not having knowledge, being misinformed about what it is, and then growing up with that misinformation and carrying it into your adult life. That's where the danger is. So I think, if we're going to educate people about albinism, I would say we start off with the children and then later on filter out into the adults. Because once a child believes these myths and these misconceptions and grows up with them, very difficult to remove those.
Yeah, indeed. So you talk of lack of education and information on albinism, and it brings me to my next question, something that you've touched on during the beginning of this interview. There are so many myths associated with albinism. We know how brutally they are killed in some countries because people believe that they can enrich themselves with their body parts and so on. What does this say about, once again, the level of education and information on albinism, and perhaps denial by some members of society on what people living with albinism are?
Well, I wouldn't say denial. I would say this is what they believe, right? We all have a belief system, right? So I would say, for when we look at what fuels the killings and what fuels these myths, right? It comes from, obviously, the traditional healing background, right? Where I would categorize it as having a traditional healer, and then, just for argument's sake, a traditional witch doctor, right? So for this argument, we're going to say the witch doctor is the one that's fueling the evil and the traditional healer is fueling the good. So if I come to you as a witch doctor and you have a problem, and I know, for argument's sake, that I need to make a lot of money out of you, I'm going to tell you I need the finger of a child with albinism, right? Cut that finger, we're going to make a lot of money. It's never been proven. It can't be proven because literally it doesn't make sense, right? So you have to ask yourself, who's fueling these myths, why they're fueling them, and who can afford to pay 100,000 rand for a finger, for argument's sake? It's not the average guy on the street, because if you have 100,000 rand to pay for a finger, you already have money. So it's not the average person who says, I want to get rich, give me the lotto numbers. We're talking about people in power, people who have influence, people who have access. Those are the people who, I don't know, for some reason believe that hard work alone isn't enough, or just praying or other belief systems aren't enough. So we now need to kill one another and chop one another and destroy families and create, a world where one fears for his life.
So part of what you say is that albinism has never hindered you or your capabilities, and instead it has given you the drive to go beyond the limitations set out for you by society. But it is not the case with others living with albinism, Simba. In some instances, you have parents who keep or lock their kids away from their communities.
Yeah.
Your message really to such parents and perhaps young people living with albinism, as it is Youth Month now, who are still sort of struggling to come out and become members of their communities?
So I wouldn't say it hasn't hindered me. I would say that I was fortunate enough to have been born into a family where I had a great support, in terms of my mother, father, brothers and sisters, an extended family, where I know of a lot of cases where others have not been, fortunate to grow up in those families. Like, as you said, they're being locked away. There's a shameful shadow that they walk under. And my message to those families and people in those communities is that, listen, that person is exactly like you. That person wants the same thing that you want out of life, and that's to be successful and to have a good life. I've got this analogy I like to use that puts things in perspective, is that we've got a box of chocolate coated candy, right? I won't mention names, but they come in various colors. But regardless of which chocolate candy you pick out of there, it could be yellow, brown, green, they all taste the same. They're chocolate. That's what we are as humans. That's what diversity is. I think a lot of the issues is that we don't push the word diversity and understand what diversity actually is. We all think we're the same, but we're not. We all have different challenges. There's things I can do that you can't do, and there's things you can do I cannot do. And once we understand that and understand that we're all fighting one thing, and that's to be alive and healthy, I think we can all come together. And for those families that are not in support of their family members with albinism, I pledge and I beg that you please take another look, rethink your methods, or the ways you're doing things. Ask them what they need. What can you do to make their lives better? Just asking those few questions, you can, do so much more.
And I think you've been very consistent with your message to the community, saying, look, we human beings. And I know that you also run workshops on educating others about albinism, as well as inspiring and perhaps motivating those who are living with albinism. How has the response been during your workshops and during your motivational sessions?
During those workshops or the motivational sessions, because my motivational sessions are literally for everyone, right? So regardless of what color you are, what shape you are. But the workshops I did were mainly focused on albinism and hearing other people's, issues and what challenges they face. And, there's been some terrible stories that I've heard, that would shake your shoes, shake your soul. And you've also heard of stories where some family members have fought and, fought the whole community so that this child can go to school, And then there are stories of where the child is literally being sold off to someone, for like I said, for so-called medicinal purposes. And what I've gathered from these stories is that there's a lot of resilience. Basically the last workshop we ran was about resilience, in terms of people with albinism being able to keep fighting through, being able to go through all the challenges we have, whether it be not being able to stand in the sun for long because of, your skin not being able to, take the sun, eyesight issues, access to books, because obviously because of your eyesight, now you're given a book and the font isn't large enough for you to see. How do you get through that barrier? And you still want to be educated. Just being discriminated when you go for a job interview because of albinism, being told that, no, you're not the right look. I've been told that plenty of times, being told you're not the right look. Clients won't be able to understand who you are and why you're here.
All right, so very quickly, because I need to wrap this up, but with this COVID-19 pandemic, have you personally experienced some difficulties and challenges? Because we know that we have to sanitize every second minute, and we know the sensitivity of the skins for people living with albinism. Have you come across any difficulties due to the COVID-19 pandemic, restrictions and regulations perhaps?
I would say, just dry hands from the harsh sanitizers that are out there. trying to find one that actually works. But, some hand lotion afterwards does the trick. But I haven't seen any major, I would say challenges. I'd say, hey, we're staying indoors longer. So, skins getting looked after. We're staying pretty, we're staying handsome. So.
All right, Simba, we really appreciate your time here on the SABC News Channel. Thank you so much for coming through to share with us your experiences, but most importantly, to motivate other individuals who are living with albinism. We thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and may everyone have a blessed day. And remember, we're all one, and together we conquer.
A beautiful, blessed day to you too. Thank you so much indeed. Simba Gozo is an entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and model who is living with albinism, sharing with us his experiences. Let's take a quick break. There's still